We're going to be reviewing the 2017 SonicWall threat report. We will have the new report coming out. It will be the 2018 threat report that will be coming out in approximately February. So if you want to look for that on the SonicWall.com site, please feel free. So just to go over some of the things that we found. Now on the left box here, we've got the security industry advances. So this is the progress that we have made over the past year against the attacks that are out in the wild. You can see the point of sale malware decline. Well, if you remember, we had big instances like Target that was hit on their point of sale. That was what the bad guys were seeing as the best method of revenue at that point. With changes that have been made in that industry, advances that have been made, it made it hard enough for them to start allocating their resources somewhere else. So you can see we had an 88% decline in new point-of-sale families. SSL, TSL encryption. So this is actually good and bad. We're going to get into the bad part of that in a minute. The good part is SSL, TSL, TLS encryption means that from your computer to the server, your session is encrypted. All right. Now this helps to protect everything that goes on, so that people can't get in and do malicious things to that actual session. And you can see that we're currently seeing about 62% of all traffic on the internet as being encrypted. All right. So if you look at Yahoo, at Facebook, YouTube, all of these sites are actually encrypted sites. And also Google, for example, which is an encrypted site, they will give priority on searches to sites that are now encrypted. So if you've got two sites that everything about them is the same, one is running HTTPS, and you see that little lock up in the corner, the other is not, they will list that one that is encrypted. They will list that first in a search. All right. Now, next thing we've seen is a decline in the exploit kit. That's sort of, for those of you that know about it, we had the CIA exploit kit that came out. We're going to discuss briefly about that in a little bit. Although we are seeing an overall decline in the exploit kits out there with that release of stuff that supposedly, allegedly came from the CIA, that did actually change things a bit. Now, the next is the unique malware sample decline. So the number of unique malware signatures that we've been seeing have gone down as well. Now, it does not mean that malware is going down, it just means that unique. So the difference there is when a malware strain is created, people will take that malware strain, they will do small modifications to it so it will not match the current signatures, and they will send that out. That is not considered to be a unique malware because it's a modification of existing one. So the unique is a little more dangerous because there's no part of that will match any existing signatures. Now, where are the cyber criminals going? What are we seeing? Well, I think everybody over the past year or the past several months has heard about ransomware. That certainly has become bigger news. We had WannaCry that came out, followed by NotPetya, which originally was thought to be Petya, and now, the most recent, we had Bad Rabbit. All right. So, as you know, NHS got hit very badly by WannaCry. All right. They lost quite a few servers. They did end up spending quite a bit of money recovering data. Huge impact on them. All right. So this has actually been a method that the bad guys have found to be very profitable for them. People will spend quite a bit of money to recover their encrypted data. The IoT DDoS attacks have been steadily on the rise. Now, IoT is sort of a weird name, Internet of Things. So for those of you that are not familiar with IoT, this is all of your small devices that you're connecting in your house. It's going to be the video camera at the front door that you can log into with an app on your smartphone. It's going to be being able to look at the stuff in your refrigerator while you're at the store. Oh, do I have milk? Do I need milk? I've got floodlights on my house, for example, that I can turn on and off from everywhere. All of those devices are considered to be are what called the Internet of Things. All right, all of those devices have internet access, and they all, most of them, stay with the default username and password, and that's why they become dangerous. They're easily hackable, so they're used a lot in DDoS attacks. One of my coworkers actually went through. He has a law enforcement official as his next door neighbor, and he went in and took a snapshot of his neighbor's contents of his refrigerator and texted it to him and said, "Hey, you need to stop at the store and pick a few things up," just to show him how easy it was to get into that stuff. All right. Next, we have the SSL TLS. Now, we talked about that, being good on one side. This is the bad side. Currently, about 50% of all malware is coming in over the encrypted session. So, not to pick on Yahoo, but they're the most obvious. Yahoo has had some malicious embedded code in advertisements on their website. So, since Yahoo is encrypted, you go to the encrypted website, you think you're safe, but now there's actually malware embedded in that site that comes straight through the firewall. Because firewalls, if you don't set them up to look at that encrypted traffic, that is all going to go straight through the firewall without being inspected. All right. And of course, the last one over here, we have seen a rise in the amount of malware targeting Android. And in fact, we'll talk about this in a minute. That on the Play Store, they actually have malware that you can download. It's disguised as other things, but it's actual malware. All right. Next slide, if it goes. Why am I not advancing to my next slide? There we go. Sorry about that. A little bit of user error there. All right, so if we can see some of these articles that we're looking at here, 67 of malware attacks via phishing in the second quarter. Important note, I'm sure everybody at this point knows what phishing is. That's that email that's sent to somebody, where you say, hey, click this link, look at the pictures from my vacation. What we've really been seeing with this and the change in the industry is the targeted phishing, where they're actually taking the time to learn something about the person they're sending the phishing email to. It's called spear phishing. And they're actually targeting specific organizations for specific information. And they've gotten more creative in how they create this email as well, make it look like it's coming from somebody they trust. They've gotten CEOs. There was one case of a CEO that was terminated for going ahead and wire transferring money off of a phishing email. So we are seeing that rise as well. Now, you can see the next one over here, the APT28 group with Eternal Blue. This is one of the CIA exploits. This allows them to actually capture traffic on Wi-Fi networks and review it and look at it. So if your password is entered in there, they can actually grab your username and password out of that. Android malware, as I said, on the App Store, there are more and more apps on there that are embedded with malware, spyware apps. All right, and then of course, going back to the CIA again, we've got them with discovering their ability to actually tap into live streams, video streams on the internet, and be able to view that information. All right, now this is all good. You probably think, well, you know what? I'm a Mac user. I don't have to worry about it. Well, with that recent CIA toolkit that was released, 3 of the tools in that were specifically targeted for Mac products, for Apple products. So if you think that that's going to protect you, you need to think about it again. All right, so now what do we have going on out there? Well, let's think about this. In 1996, we only had about 10,000 computer viruses out there. Now, a little over 20 years later, and what are we seeing? 2 million new viruses every month. That's a lot of viruses out there. It's over 28 new viruses every minute coming out into the wild. All right. Well, how do we protect you? Well, there's a bunch of stuff that we're doing out here. So we share information. SonicWall shares information with over 50 different research organizations. All the information is shared so we can see what the trends are, what the latest attacks are, what the latest vulnerabilities are. Microsoft, when they release their announcements of what vulnerabilities are out there, we have always been able to provide patches for that, updates and protections for that within 24 hours of it being released. We have over 1 million sensors deployed. Now, these sensors are continuously collecting data. What attack trends are we seeing? What viruses are we seeing? What malware are we seeing? And that information is all compiled together. And you can actually, if you have a SonicWall firewall, you can actually see that information in the firewall. It is provided to everybody of what trends we're seeing. All of this is supported by a 24/7, 365 monitoring by our engineers so they can watch and see what's going on. We have a less than 24-hour response to zero-day vulnerabilities. And now with the addition of Capture, because we've gone ahead and done this machine learning, we actually can detect new malware, new zero-day, new strains of ransomware, etc., as soon as they hit the wild. When Bad Rabbit came out, it hit Russia and Ukraine first. Well, and the time it hit Russia and Ukraine, all of our devices worldwide were already protected. Everybody that was running Capture was already protected. So what are some of the other things we see? Well, we're seeing 100,000 malware samples a day, 100,000 malicious events every day that we're reviewing, looking at, and creating signatures for. This is why just the pure scale of what's going on is why you can't just do, people writing signatures anymore. This is why, machine learning is so important. This is why we have that as a feature in our firewalls. So you've got all this stuff going on here. You've got, the Internet of Things, DDoS, phishing, ransomware, zero-day, encrypted malware. There's ways of protecting against this. All right, and it's sort of a stacked protection. This is why we do the DPI-SSL inspection. All right, where we're actually decrypting that SSL traffic so we can inspect it. We've got the learning algorithms for the firewall. We provide mobile security so that you're able to create remote sessions securely from anywhere. And then, of course, backed up with our Capture sandbox environment. So what do we really have going on out there? Well, when your end user is requesting this information and it hits the firewall is going to go do a whole bunch of different things with that traffic between the. It's going to say, okay, well, we have geo-IP blocking. Are we blocking this? Are we blocking that country? Are we blocking that IP range? Because most businesses, you don't need to communicate to Russia. You don't need to talk to China, North Korea, or Ukraine. There's other countries out there also that you don't really need to be able to communicate to. So why allow traffic to those countries, or why allow traffic from those countries? So you can go ahead and block that, and that's one of the phases of protecting yourself. We have what's called the CNC server. So CNCs it's short for command and control. So all the malware, all your DDoSes that are being launched, they are run through these command and control centers. They're a central location. They're a server that all of this stuff talks back to, so the people in control of it can communicate with the infected endpoints. So we are continuously updating the IPs for those command and controls, and we are blocking those. So when it looks at the traffic and it sees it, it compares it. If this is one of those IPs that we consider to be infected, it blocks it and prevents it from talking to it. Now, the advantage says if you're on a SonicWall firewall, say that WannaCry, we had the signatures a month before it came out, but say for some reason it got through, it got onto your PC. Your PC, before it encrypts itself, is going to attempt to talk to that command and control. If it can't reach it, it doesn't encrypt it. So you're protected until you step out from behind the firewall, but at least it's some protection until then. And then you can see that traffic and hopefully take actions to prevent it. Now, some of the other things that are going on after those things are done, you're going to see here we have the SSL decryption going on. That's where we're decrypting the traffic going to that SSL site. Then it's going to be able to apply its gateway antivirus, the cloud antivirus, It's going to do intrusion prevention, and of course, it's going to turn on capture. So our capture servers, what's going to happen with those is it will send that downloaded file that you're attempting to get. It's going to send it up to our capture database, and it's going to look at it in multiple different ways. It's going to check for a hash. It's going to actually execute that file in a sandbox environment where we use 3 different engines to run that. One of those engines that we run is called Lastline. Lastline is the only vendor that under NSS Labs testing was able to detect 100% of malware with 0 false positives. Nobody else had been able to do that. And then they were so good at it, they actually went and did it for a 2nd year in a row. So that is one of the engines we use. All right, and you can see the trend here. This is a very busy slide. We're not going to really run through the whole thing, just to give you an idea of what's going on as it looks at all that traffic. Now, just to discuss a little bit more about capture and what it does. When I've mentioned, through the various slides, and I talk about this machine learning, this is a part of that machine learning. So this is an intelligent, self-driven piece of our protection. The file comes in. It goes up to our capture engine. It looks at it, compares it to multiple different AV engines. It runs it, launches it, executes the code in these VM environments. So it's able to assess it for malicious activity. It's able to do things, like they've gotten smart with malware. It will actually look to see when was the last time the mouse was moved. What type of video driver does it have? Because the VM environments, they run a different video driver than an actual PC. And they'll actually look for all that to make sure they're not in some sort of environment like sandbox environment. Our sandbox environment will actually create that. It will actually show a mouse move. It will actually show a regular. It will actually show a actual video driver from a PC instead of a VM video driver. It will move the clock forwards, backwards to show time passing and trick that file into executing. Once it goes through all of that and it says, you know what, this is malware. It sends a hash. It creates a hash of that file and shares it with all the other firewalls that are running our capture engine. Everybody is now protected because of that first person that downloaded that file. Then a signature is written for that and pushed out to our AV engine. So now everybody is able to benefit from that first person that found it. So you don't need to be running capture to benefit from that because the AV engine will get it. But if you're the first person to get a virus or malware, you do need to be running capture because then you'll be protected as well. All right, just in a slow week over this summer, our capture threat labs, what we were just talking about, caught, now this is in one week, over almost 205,000 new signatures. It's over 28 new viruses every 60 seconds. That's a lot of stuff out there that you need to stay on top of. Now, we've been discussing a lot as we've proceeded through this about the DPISSL, deep packet inspection of SSL traffic. So what exactly does that mean, and what exactly do we do with that? So as I said, when you go to a website and you see that little green lock up in the corner there, so you're talking about a lot of popular sites, Facebook, YouTube, Yahoo, Google. These are all encrypted sites. So because the traffic is encrypted, as it goes to come through the firewall has no ability to look at that traffic. Now, this isn't SonicWall. This is all firewalls across the board. All right. Since they can't look at the traffic, they just pass it through. That traffic is going straight through to your endpoint. No inspection, no checking. The only thing that's been done to it at that point is if you're running the GeoIP and the CNC, that's the only checks that's been done on that traffic. All right. So it still helps, but it's not enough. Because look at all this stuff on this slide. You've had CryptoLocker that's come through. All of these major malware strains have come through on encrypted channels. None of this has been inspected, and it's all made it through to the end. So, as I was mentioning, for encrypted traffic, TLS, we have seen a substantial rise in the amount of traffic that is going on. We're currently around 62%. Some estimates are putting it as high as 80% of all traffic is being encrypted. Now, when you think about 80% of your traffic is encrypted, 50% of all malware is coming in over encrypted sites. That's a lot of malware that's coming through without any inspection being done to it. All right, so how do we deal with this? All right, well, let's take the Google. We're going to look at Gmail as an example. So you can see up on the top there on the left, you got the little green lock. This is an encrypted site. So your end user in your environment has gone to check their mail. This is not being inspected. This is being passed straight through. And, of course, Google, hey, we're trusted. They're a safe site, so we don't need to worry about it. They open their email, and they've got this John Adams send an email, hey, check this out. All right. And they go ahead, and now they click on that link. Well, that link is malware. All right. So they've now infected their computer. So the way we deal with this is now you can see the server. Here's our user. All of this is encrypted. All right. When you put the SonicWall in between, what it does is it plays what's called a man-in-the-middle attack. All right. But it's a trusted man-in-the-middle attack because we're doing it for a good reason, not malicious. So now when your end user goes to create his session, it first creates the session to the firewall with a certificate on the firewall, and now the session is encrypted up to that point. Then the firewall will then create the encrypted session from the firewall to the data center. Now, the reason for this is on the firewall itself, by doing these two different streams of encryption, the traffic is unencrypted, it's inspected, it's re-encrypted. It never leaves that box. So you never have any risk of somebody else capturing that information as it goes through. Now, because that traffic is unencrypted, we can use our gateway antivirus. We can use the anti-spyware, intrusion prevention, our content filtering, app control, even capture will work now. Now, why is that important? Well, when you go to download something over encrypted, the firewall can't tell if it's an attachment. So it will never route that up to our capture engine for inspection. All right. So now the last piece of this, of course, is going to be questions. So we're going to go ahead and open this up. See if we have any questions. Let me just unmute everybody. And we'll go ahead and take any questions that anybody may have. All right. Looks like all I unmuted was Ben. Apologize, it's taking me a minute for this. Normally I just right click and say unmute, and it's just unmuted one person. If you'd like to type any questions you have in the meantime, there we go, unmute all. All right. So, Young notes the extent to which it is the role of the auditor to bring that information. All right, we got some other audio going on back there. So do we have anybody that has any questions about what they've seen?
If you don't get any questions right away, maybe talk about the computing power required to turn on these services and what it does for your firewall requirements.
Okay. All right, so we had a quick question here for the power that's required for the firewall. So when you are putting a firewall in and you're sizing the firewall properly for your environment, there are several factors that need to be taken into consideration. This is where somebody, SCA, of course, is a company that's going to be able to help you make sure that you get the right firewall in there, that you get sized properly, that everything on it is configured the way you need it to be configured. So one of the factors that play into this, and part of the reason why I talk about DPISSL so much, is because it does have an impact on the firewall. So a normal firewall, you come in, we're looking at number of users, we're looking at the amount of bandwidth, are you hosting servers, what are your plans for growth? Are you planning on increasing the amount of bandwidth you have coming in? Do you have multiple ISPs? All of that information plays a part in determining what firewall you need to get. Because across the line of our firewalls, we go everything from what we call a SOHO, which is meant for a small office, all the way up to, as I said, a data center sized firewalls, what we call our firewall sandwich, where we can push 200 gigs of data and scan that data through. So finding that right firewall, you take all that information and you look at the spec sheet to see what that firewall can do. The DPI-SSL portion of that does add a significant overhead to the firewall. So for some companies, the firewall that they currently have in place may be more than sufficient. It may be a firewall that they can still keep. For others, though, it may, that additional resource requirements that it puts on there, because it's unencrypting everything, it's re-encrypting everything, and that's using a lot of memory, a lot of horsepower, a lot of CPU off of that firewall. So that may push you up one, sometimes even two firewalls. All right, so it's very important to get somebody knowledgeable to come in, look at your environment, discuss your environment with you, and make sure that the firewall that's going to be put in there would be the correct one. Anything else you? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and try for questions again. Let's do this because there was quite a bit of noise in the background. So if you have a question about anything we've gone over, or if you have a question, more general even for firewalls that maybe you have a question about or like an answer on, go ahead, throw that into the chat window for me that you have a question. We'll go ahead and open up your line, or you can throw the question in there. All right, and then I'll go ahead and unmute you so we can get your question. All right. Any questions at all? Is everybody able to hear me still? All right. All right. So we've got a hand up here on Jeff Wright. So let me go ahead and unmute you. All right, Jeff.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Awesome. I was speaking with one of our clients this morning about their current NSA firewall. They currently have an NSA 2600, and going through their basically their configuration as far as what's licensed, what's not licensed. SSL DPI was currently not licensed for their 2600. Mm-hmm. Is that, how would they go about, if you wouldn't mind, how would they go about actually adding that functionality to the 2600, or do they need to upgrade to the 2650?
Mm-mm. No, they don't need to do any upgrade, and there's no additional licensing that needs to be purchased either. All of the 2600 is what we consider to be a Gen 6 device. So basically what you're talking about is a SOHO, SOHO W, TZ300 through TZ600, NSA 2600 through NSA 6600. Those are all considered to be Gen 6 devices. So what they'll need to do is in my SonicWall, they can go in on the DPI-SSL and there'll be a green button there. They click on the green button, that will activate DPI-SSL. So with the Gen 6 boxes, SonicWall made the decision to make DPI-SSL a standard part of the firewall. It's not dependent on any other licensing. And the reason for that is because we do see such a sharp rise in DPI in that SSL traffic that we needed to make that available as a basic function of the firewall. Just like firewall rules, it had to be a basic function of the firewall. Okay.
Okay. Now they will need to have the most current firmware to take advantage of that, correct? And it has to be covered current on service, correct?
So as long as they're running at least the 6.1 firmware, they should be fine. I do recommend right now, the best firmware to be running right now is the 6.2.7 firmware. It is currently general release. We have also the 6.2.9 firmware that is currently available. The difference for that one, it's the 6.2.7 firmware, but it has additional connection counts. So if they're running DPI-SSL on that 2600 and they're coming close to maxing out on connection counts, you may want to go to the 6.2.9 firmware instead. That make sense?
Yes. Thank you for the information.
You're welcome. All right. Any other question? All right. So do we have anybody else with a question here? Again, it can be more general. It doesn't have to be specific to a firewall. All right. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to turn this. Oh, we do have another. Sorry about that, Nick. I did not see that. I apologize. All right, Nick, you should be able to talk now.
Okay. I put the general question in the chat for everybody to see, but just in case you can't see the chat, is there any way? I mean, is there a solution that's going to be coming up that's going to be a little bit more affordable, not only to the businesses and the home user, with that'll be able to meet with DPISSL and the new proliferation of gig speed internet stuff that's being offered by a lot of the major carriers? Because right now we're looking at like an NSA 5600 for a home user, and that's just a little bit of an overkill.
Okay, so, well, that's actually an issue we've been seeing more and more, obviously, with the GigE that's available out there. You know, it's cheap for providers to drop, you know, bandwidth at a location. We actually have in this country, I know it doesn't feel like it to a lot of us because of you know, what we consider to be slow service, but we actually have an overabundance of fiber in this country. There's more fiber currently in the ground that's dark, meaning it's not being used, than there is actual fiber that's lit. You know, you had like level 3, for example, that, you know, every time they would run a new fiber run, they didn't just drop one fiber, they dropped a whole bundle of fiber in there. A lot of other countries were doing the same thing. So what it's done is it's provided for very inexpensive bandwidth going out to that end user. So for routers, it's pretty easy. They just have to look at the layer 3 information. They can route it, send the packet on. For the firewall, it's much harder inspecting that traffic because we go all the way up to layer 7. And for those of you on the call that aren't familiar, this is what's the layer 1 through layer 7 is how we look at the traffic and the way the packet is done. Layer 7 is the application layer. So we're actually looking at all of the information for the application, inspecting all of that information. It's much more intensive than what a router does. Just looks, okay, this is the IP, this is where it's going, go. Sort of like if you did a comparison, it would be like giving somebody an address and saying, go here, giving somebody an address and saying, and find my glasses when you get there. You know, it's going to take a lot more time to go find those glasses once you get to the house, especially if it's locked. So since we do see this as a trend, we are working on this. We have a new series of firewall coming out, the NSA 6.5 that we're coming out with. So we have the 2650, which was alluded to before. We have 3650, 4650. These are all firewalls that what we've done is we've kept them very similar to the price point of their counterpart. Like the 2600 was roughly for the full retail price was roughly in the 3,500 range. The 2650 is roughly in the 4,000 range, you know, for full retail pricing. But the 2650 will push a lot more traffic, almost as much as the 3600. And more importantly, it has 20 times the connection count for DPISSL. So it can do a lot more inspection of sessions than what the 2600 could do. The 3650 will push a full gig circuit off of the initial testing. Now, we're still in the internal beta phase, so those numbers are not officially released yet. All right, so you can't really hold me to that. But that's what we're going to be looking at. Where right now, to do a full gig, you're looking at a minimum of an NSA 5600, which is very cost prohibitive for most environments. We are looking to get that down to a lower firewall. And again, you know, the biggest issue with it is just the fact that we are scanning at the application layer, and it does take it is very intensive to scan all of that information. All right. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
All right. Fantastic. Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. We got another question here, so let me go up and grab this one. All right. Brad?
Yeah.
All righty. Go ahead. What is your question, sir?
So I wanted you to educate me a little bit about DPISSL inspection versus intrusion protection. Are two separate functions, or?
They're actually dependent functions. So the DPISSL is just the actual DPISSL is not an inspection. It is literally the decryption of the encrypted traffic. So if you go to Fox News, that's unencrypted. So the firewall will look at that, and the IPS engine, the intrusion prevention engine, will be able to look at the information there and help protect you. You go to Google, that's encrypted. IPS won't help you because it can't see the traffic. So the DPISSL will unencrypt the traffic. Now your IPS will work, and it will be able to inspect that traffic. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All righty. Any other questions? I think that's all I see for hands that are up. So I do have one more brief topic I want to discuss. Let me just, I've got, trying to see the bottom there. I don't think I had any more questions, but my scroll bar isn't scrolling down far enough for me to see everybody. Okay, so the last topic I just want to discuss is something called security as a service. So security as a service is essentially a rental program. So instead of having to go out and buy a firewall for full retail price, or the price you get it through, one of our partners such as SCA, you actually pay a monthly fee. So SCA would be able to do the intermediary for you, get that box for you, and now you're able to install that box and just pay a much smaller monthly fee. Now, the advantage to this is with bandwidth becoming so available, like I just moved into a new house about 6 months ago. All we had was charter internet available. I had a 100 meg circuit. Not great. Well, AT&T dropped fiber in front of my house. Now I've got a gig circuit in my house. Well, the TZ400 I was running at my house before isn't going to handle a gig circuit. So now I got to upgrade. So with security as a service, it gives me the advantage of being able to upgrade that firewall at any time. So if I was running the TZ400, now all of a sudden I need an NSA 3600, all I have to do is pay the difference in price between those two each month, that monthly price. I don't have to buy a new firewall. I turn the other one in, I get the new one, I pay that difference in incremental cost each month, and I'm all set. Okay. And of course, those firewalls, the security as a service firewalls come with all services. So you get that firewall with capture, as well as all the other security services turned on. All right, and I'm going to turn this back over to Zach. All right. Okay, so I just wanted to... I don't hear you. Hold on. Okay. Now go ahead and try it. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of draw everything together. I still don't hear you on here. No. All right. Yep, we're trying to get Zach here to speak up a little bit. His phone seems to be muted at the moment. He's just going to go over a couple of last things. While we're waiting for him, I'd just like to say to everybody that's on the call, thank you very much for attending. We really appreciate it. Hopefully you've had some benefit from this. All right, I hear you now.
Yes. Okay, so I just wanted to say thank you to everybody that's joining us. I didn't mean to cut off David here now that my microphone's working, but just thanks for everybody that joined us. We're going to have the availability to look over this in the future this security talk that we've done, we're going to be sending out to everyone that wasn't able to join us. And those of you that were, if you'd like to watch it in your leisure or at a different time, just wanted to say thanks to everyone for joining us. We will be, if you have questions about any of these topics, you can feel free to reach out to us, your account manager or your engineer, and we'll be happy to give you information on the security as a service, DPISSL, or any of the other topics that were covered today. Just wanted to say thanks for dropping in. This is going to be the first of an ongoing webinar series that we're going to be putting on. So hope you enjoyed it. Hope you got something out of it. And feel free to let any of us know if you have any questions. I'm going to let David wrap it up here. And also wanted to say thank you to him and to SonicWall for loaning him to us for the day. He's going to wrap it up. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, we had one more question regarding the security as a service. The 12-month subscription does not reset when you upgrade. So once you do the initial, when you sign up for the initial program, if you are 6 months into it and you need to upgrade that firewall, that does not cause you to have to stay for an additional 6 months after. Okay. All right. So I think that's it. So just want to say again, thank you everybody for being able to attend. If you do have any questions, feel free. I think most of you have my email in there from the invite. Feel free to shoot me an email and I will get it over with SCA. Or if you have SCA's contact directly, feel free to reach out to them. If there is something they need to come to me to, they obviously know how to reach me. Okay. Thank you again and have a good day, everyone.